you would use for every other product you create. So some of those tools, before we get into the actual creating the project stuff, we've already used these tools. I just want to go over them again because it's been a couple weeks. So under the mesh tools, this is where we're going to find a lot of these things. One of them is the insert edge loop. Okay, the whole purpose of inserting edge loops is I need a division. I need some line so that I can deform it. So if I needed a line, I can click a line right here on this edge and it inserts an edge loop all the way around. Okay, and I could insert a loop above it and insert an edge loop below it. I can double click this one, I can scale it in, and you can see how I've used those edge loops to help define an area. Okay, now I didn't put in a bunch of edge loops just to put in a bunch of edge loops. What I've done is just put in an edge loop because I needed it. What people like to do, for some reason, is they like to just go to a cube like this, and they like to just put in a bunch of divisions. Okay? This is never how you want to work because that gives you very little ability to actually go through and model the stuff because there's too much divisions there where we can't really have control over the entire thing. We add divisions as we go. Okay, so for this I needed a little bit of a lip here, so I just added a couple edge loops and then popped it in. Now if I needed a little dip right here, okay, so let's say that I had this top and I wanted a recess inside the top of it. I can't insert an edge loop to do that, but what I can do is do an extrusion. So I'm going to go to face mode and click on this top face, and under edit mesh I'm going to find extrude. Okay, and on extrude, there's a couple different things that I can do. One of them is I can click on that blue arrow. Most of the stuff you do is with the blue arrow when you're in extrude. So I can click on this blue arrow and I can pull it. Okay, that really doesn't give me a dip. I could pull it down, and you'll see I get this really funky black and gray thing happening on there. Okay, that's definitely not what we want to happen. I first have to offset it. So I'll go over to this offset, and I'll pull it in until I have a nice division. What I'm doing is very similar to where I inserted edge loops, is I'm trying to find a sweet spot for where I want that thing to be pushed down. Okay, like how far is that edge coming in before it drops down and we have a dip. So let's say about there is good, and then I can go to edit mesh and extrude again, and then I can push it down. Okay, so that created a little dip inside of there. I'm going to go back to object mode. I'm going to click on it. Okay, so very, very quickly you see I've just added 3 edge loops and made a little indent by scaling it. I've grabbed the top face, offset it with an extrusion, extruded it again to push it in. So that's all I've done with that specific shape. Now if I go and hit 3, you'll see that we get this really funky shape. Okay, because remember 3 is like our smooth preview. It's like what happens if you smooth this thing out. That's what it's going to look like. So this doesn't look like a jar of anything right now. It just looks like a big blobby mess. But what I can use is my other tool. So I'm going to go to edges, and I'm going to grab all of these edges. Remember on the desk when we needed to add a bevel so that we wouldn't lose our shape? That's what I'm going to do here. So I'm grabbing all these edges all the way around. And I'll go to wireframe so I can see it better. There we go. And I'm going to grab these. Grab this. Now I don't want to grab any vertical ones because the vertical ones are going to help keep it round. Like if this is a jar that I would unscrew, I don't want to smooth that out, or I don't want to bevel those. So that looks good like that. I think I have all those. I missed a couple right here too. There we go. There we go. Okay. Now see how long that took me to do, right? That was like a crazy amount of time. A couple hotkeys that will come in handy. Shift you're familiar with. So if you're in any program and you use shift to select something, that's usually like a toggle, right? So you shift click it, it goes on, shift click it, it goes off. In Maya it works the same way. So if I were to grab all of these and come over here and hold shift and grab all of these, the ones that weren't selected are now selected. And then if I shift marquee this, I would grab the opposite. Okay? So very quickly I can grab exactly what I need because I just need the horizontal one. So doing just these 2 swipes like this, like that, spinning around, holding shift and doing that, I've grabbed all the horizontal lines. All right. The other one that's kind of handy is control, and control is a deselector. So if I just hold control and marquee, it'll deselect whatever I have selected. The other one is control shift, okay, and that's just add. So shift is a toggle, control is a deselector, and control shift is an add. So use those throughout because you'll see that it's not so much about spending 6 years trying to double click and select everything in here because that would take literally forever. It's about finding ways to select things quicker so we can move faster to do what we need to do. All right, so I have all those selected. I'm going to go to Edit Mesh. I'm going to go to Bevel. I'm going to put on a 2-segment. No, not yet. I'm going to put on a 2-segment bevel, and I'll put the fraction. 0.5 does look good, so I'll leave it at 0.5. Go back to Object Mode. Hit 3 now. And if we look at 3 at this point, you'll see now it actually looks like a jar. It looks like something where it would be in a product ad because it looks round and it looks like we could unscrew it. Now it's not perfect. The gap here I don't like. I think this is probably too much of a gap. But again, we don't need to be concerned with getting it perfect the first time. We just need to know how we can edit it. So I'm going to switch to my front view. So I hold the space bar, I hold the left mouse on Maya, and I switch to front view. That should have worked. There we go. And I'm going to go to vertex mode, go to wireframe, and I'm going to hit 1 just to get back to this. Now if I grab the points here just straight across, I can just move these down. Then I can hold control, see how this comes in handy, and just deselect these points and then push that down too. Okay, so I just squeezed that area in the top. I didn't want to scale it because scaling it would cause my bevels to look kind of funky. All right, so now I'll hit 3. I'll go back to object mode. I'll click here, click there. That looks much better. It looks like it's a little bit tighter going around where that lid was. Now if I look at the top of this, you'll see that this doesn't look very nice. It still looks kind of chunky going around it. When we switch from 1 to 3, this is putting like a default smooth preview on it. That's all it's doing, nothing else. If I want an actual smooth, I'm going to go to Mesh and say Smooth. Okay, and this does 1 division. So if I go to 2 divisions, you'll see that this looks very much like what we had when we hit 3. Okay, so if I just crank this up a little bit further, let's say to 3. There we go. Now we're getting something that looks more like it should look. Okay, it looks more like a container. Now one thing we're going to notice about this is it might be hard to tell on the projector screen because it does distort my image a little bit, but this doesn't really look round. I mean, it's rounded, but it doesn't look perfectly circular. If I created a cylinder and I made my cylinder bigger, like that, okay, and I'll round it off by adding a bunch of subdivisions here just so we can see it. You can see that there's a definite difference in the roundness of what I just created and this cylinder right here. Okay, you see how there's a tiny gap in some areas? In other areas, it's like right on top of it. Okay, so like right here, it's touching it, but down here we have a huge gap. Okay, so when I take this cube and I smooth it, even though it looks like it's making a cylinder, it's not. It's making kind of like a boxy cylinder. All right, so as quickly as I made this, I can make another one. All right, using those same tools. So I'm going to bring this back up to here. I'm going to size it to about the size of the container. Okay, so if this is like a cream, you typically don't have like a cream in a jar that you would unscrew being like that big. That I don't think that's possible. Usually they're like super duper tiny like this. Okay, and this is probably like the $5 thing you get from Walmart. If you went down to like this is like the $300 one you'd get from Macy's or something. All right, so what we need to do is we need to do exactly what we just did on the other one, but do it on this one. Okay, now because I can add divisions just going around it like this and keep it round, I actually won't have to smooth this one, which is awesome. So I'm going to go to my cylinder options here, and I put 50. That's a good amount of divisions going around to keep this perfectly rounded. I'm going to take my caps and set that to 0. So now I have no cap right here. So when I right click and go to face, it's much easier to grab instead of having to click on all those faces going around. Okay? So now the same process. I go to extrude. Here's the hotkey. So if you ever see me not go to extrude, that's what I'm hitting. I'm going to go to offset and shrink it down. I'm going to go to extrude again and push it down. And I'll even give this a little bit of offset extra just to kind of give it a little bit of taper. There should be good. Okay. I need to go to Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop. I need to put in, where is the lid stop? The lid's going to stop about here. Okay. Now another thing I can do is if I wanted to create a division on top and a division on the bottom, I have to kind of eyeball that to get it accurate, right? I can't just, like if I were to click division here and division there, there's nothing to say those are accurate except for my eyeballs. But if I go to my edit mesh with that selected and I say bevel, well now I can go ahead and create a bevel which will automatically do that. And my options didn't pop up, so I'll just go to the bevel here. Now they popped up. I'll say I need 2 divisions, and you can see here's where I put that original edge, and then here's the 2 edge loops that I would need in order for this thing to look right. So then I can adjust my fraction. So 0.1 would probably be good there. I'm going to go to my edge. I'm going to double click. I'm going to scale it in. And I'm not grabbing this and then that because that would obviously, again, make it so it's not even. I grab the center one and scale it in just a hair. Like that. Okay. Then I'm going to add my bevels. So I'm going to go all the way around everything here. Okay, now this one's not going to let me select that one easily, so I'm just going to do that one after. Same thing on the bottom, so I'll do that one after also. I could do other stuff to get it to work, like I could just go hold shift and marquee all of these, hold control and then deselect and deselect. So I just deselected all the verticals, hold shift, marquee the bottom one, hold control, deselect that. So that's one way I could select those very quickly. Bevel, there we go. 2 divisions, 0.5 looks like it's still good. Back to object mode, hit 3. Oh, we don't need to hit 3. I'm actually going to put in a little bit more. I think I want that fraction to be maybe 1. That looks better. And then the segments, I'll do 3 segments, just so it's extra roundy. Okay? So now I haven't smoothed this out at all. This is just a cylinder with a lot of divisions, and it just has the same exact stuff I did on the other one. But the nice thing about it is that it is perfectly round as opposed to the other one. So never try to get in the habit of working super slow, because as quickly as I modeled the first one and then realized, oops, it's not perfectly round, I can make a cylinder and remake that very quickly. Okay? So while you're doing this assignment, that's one of your goals, is to make sure you're working as quickly as you can and accurately as you can. If you see that something has gone awry, like this face is all of a sudden over here, you can obviously try to put it back, but it might be quicker to just make a cylinder, redo your divisions, get it back in there. I have a student in my modeling class. He did a chair. He modeled a chair. He spent 3 hours modeling this chair because it's like a fancy chair like you guys are sitting in, and it has cranks and whatever else. And then he went home and his Maya didn't open. So then he went back to the previous version and the chair wasn't there. So then he had to model the chair again. And he spent another 2 hours modeling the chair, and then Maya crashed before he saved it. So by the 3rd time, that chair was 10 times better than it originally was, and he was down to about a half hour to create the chair. Okay? So you're going to be quicker every single time you do this kind of stuff. All right? So I don't want you to think that it's going to be, you know, let's do this one time, let's just muscle through it, and then just never think about this again. All right, so there's our first container, is this one. So there's one container. Just set that one over to the side for now. I'm just going to show you how I can model another container. It's not a cube. We just went over that. Okay, so I'm going to grab a cylinder, and this one's going to be more of like a gel. So something that maybe you would like squirt into your hand. So we would have a longer, taller container. So very similar process. So I'm going to go to, let's say, 40 divisions here. Nothing on the caps. I'm going to go to the, not that, I'm going to go to my edge loops. we go. I'm going to go to about here. That looks like about the cap size. I'm going to go to my mesh tools and go, edit mesh and go to bevel. Add a division. Take this to 0.1, nope, 0.05, that's good. Double click this, scale it in. There we go. So there's one cap. Now on a metal container, what you would typically have is on the bottom, you would have a little lip that would go in, okay? If we look at a shaving cream can, you'll usually see this little lip at the very, very bottom of it. There's a good example. Even though it's in here, you'll see that little lip there. You'll see the little lip here, okay, where it kind of dips in a little bit, all right? So that's what we're going to do there too. And again, it's the same process. I go to Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop. That looks about right. I go to this. I add a bevel to it. Add another segment. Too small. Do you see how I'm not looking at any specific numbers? It's literally just your eye. So as you're doing these, you look at your eye, or not look at your eye, you look at your stuff and you figure out, is it looking good? Does that height look like the height of what we would be trying to do, okay? Too many times we get in the habit of, what are his numbers? 0.5? Mine doesn't look like that at 0.5. And then you fight with that. Just find something that looks good. All right, so we
put the dinosaur DNA capsules on the inside.
Yes. I'll have Newman carry it out for us. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and put some bevels all over this. Edit mesh, bevels, 0.2 segments here, and 0.5 was actually pretty good. I'll leave that at 0.5. I forgot to do the top and the bottom, not a big deal. The bottom, I actually want to go ahead and model a little bit more on that. Not that we're going to see it, but like the bottom of these cans is, we can't see a picture of it. There it is. I think that's the one from Jurassic Park. The bottom of the cans is usually like caved in a little bit. There's like a little dip. We're not going to see it, but just to kind of show how easily we can do this, I'm going to extrude it. I'm going to offset it this way. I'm going to push it in, and then I'll extrude it again, offset again. Come on. And push it in. Okay, so we just have a little bit of a cave in at the bottom. That's all I wanted to have there. Okay, so now I can go ahead and on the top of this, I'll grab that face. And right here, I'm going to go to multi, because I want to grab a face and an edge, so I have to grab both. And then I can go to bevel. And then I'll add my 2 segments. Okay, there we go. Perfect. All right, so as quickly as I've been doing this, you saw I modeled 3 products, boom, 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 okay? You will get this quick by the end of this assignment because you're going to do 3 products. So your first one should go probably pretty slow. It might take you an hour and a half to model this thing. That's going to be your first product. Your second product will be something along the lines of this. Obviously, that one's going to go a bit quicker. It's the same process. It's just a taller bottle now. The third one should go super quick because you've already done the same things. I haven't thrown 1,000 tools at you. We've used Insert Edge Loop, we've used the Extrude, and we've used Bevel. Those are the only 3 tools that we've used for this, okay? Now here's where it's going to get tricky because what we need to do, I'm just going to reset this guy back to 0. What we need to do is now make this look like an actual product, because right now it looks like a cylinder that's gray, and we need it to look like a product. So looking at this, okay, so here is a shaving cream can right here, okay? So this can originally was probably a piece of metal in a factory, right? Like they just like shot it out of however they make it. And then they wrapped a label around the can. So the label probably looks something like that. And they just wrapped it around and they stuck it on the side of it. So what we have to do is very, very similar to what they've done. We have to make a label that looks like this for our product, and we have to wrap it around the can, okay? So just to show how this is going to work, I'm going to borrow this one. So I'm just going to save this picture as. Now, also notice that I have not even saved anything here, so I'm going to make a new project. I'm going to go to New. I'm going to say Sarcona Product. Make sure it goes in my folder, and I'll save my stuff. I can't just put this image anywhere. I have to put it in my folder. There, there, there. Okay, so it went in my work folder, and I will hit accept. And so now when I go to save this picture, I can make sure I put it into my work folder. And this is just placement as far as like what it's going to look like, okay? Sure, I'll just leave it just like that. All right, so I just want you to see what it looks like when we take this flat label and try to put it on this can. So I'm going to assign a new material to it. We're using Mental Ray still. We're using Mila's. And on the Mila material, we just go to the diffuse color little swatch button there. Click the file, click the folder. There it is, okay? Now, because I created my project, I dropped my image into the source images folder, it was right there. If I didn't create my project or set my project or put it in the right spot, it wouldn't be there, and I would know to abandon ship and make sure everything's correct before I proceed. Hit open, close, and that's what we get, okay? So this 3D cylinder has no idea how to take this flat image and put it on there. It doesn't know what we're trying to do with it. It doesn't know what a shaving cream can is, okay? Or a lotion jar. So what we need to do is tell it how we want it to lay out, okay? So obviously you're not going to do this part that I just did because you already know what's going to happen. So I'm going to assign a brand new material called a surface shader, okay? And the whole point of a surface shader is this. We just get flat color. That's what we want, is just flat color, just so we can see what a texture looks like so we can adjust it. On the out color here, we're just going to click the mappy button and go to checkerboard. Okay, I should probably save this too. Sarcona modeling product 01. There we go. Still thinking. All right, so if you look at my picture, this is what my checkerboard looks like. It looks like a bunch of checkers. This looks like 4 checkers maybe. If I go to my place 2D texture and I add more in the repeat area, like 2020, obviously I get more here, but now these ones look like they're all stretched out. Your goal when we do this is that everything everywhere on this object should have nice square checkers. That's our goal, okay? So if the checkers here are perfectly square, the checkers here should be perfectly square. So when we bring in a circle and drop it on here, it matches perfectly, okay? So I'm going to grab this, and I'm just going to turn the texture off by hitting 5. Okay, remember 5 turns texture off, 6 turns texture on. I'm going to go to the UV menu here, and this is how we can change how Maya is figuring out how the texture is getting laid out. So right now it's just kind of like default whatever a cylinder was. So I'm going to go to here and say I want to do cylindrical mapping. So what this should do is take my cylinder shape and wrap a cylinder around it of how that texture is going to get projected. So I'm going to say cylinder, and you'll see that we get, I'm just going to hit, didn't do anything. We get this little cylinder around this item. You can kind of see this red block here. I'll pull this out so you can see it better. That, there we go. So you see this cylinder that it created. So basically what it's doing is taking a flat image and it's wrapping it around right now 180. So I'm going to go over here to 180 and say go 360, and you'll see how it wraps all the way around. I'm just going to slide this back on. You don't need to move it off of there. I just did that so you can see what it's going to do. Okay, so now if I hit 6, you'll see that these don't look like they're square, but they definitely look better. Now as I take this green square here and scale this up, you can see that I'm scaling the texture. So as I scale this vertically, my squares are now becoming squares instead of rectangles. Okay, so that's looking pretty good right there. Now if I look at the bottom, it's messed up. If I look at the top, it's messed up. Okay, because what's happening is this cylinder is projecting this way, it's not projecting that way or this way. Okay, so we'll have to do different things for those items. Now to see how each one of these items is laid out, we go to UV, and we can go to this thing called the UV editor. And this will bring up a separate window. It's very difficult to look at right now, so I'm just going to go to image, display image to turn that off. And it shows here is that picture. Here is that item that you've modeled cut and flattened out. That's what we're seeing, okay? So like, I don't know if you guys do this, but when you get a the end of your box of cereal, you go through and you cut all the edges, and then you can lay out your box of cereal flat. No? I'm the only one. I'm weird. Okay. That's what it's doing, okay? So it's just flattening out the entire thing. So the top of this is actually right, if I zoom in, the hotkeys are the same as Maya, the top is right there. So it's like this really tiny, thin thing, right? We can't see it. So that's why it turns out weird. So I'm going to grab the face of this, and I'm going to grab pretty much any face that's facing up and down, okay? So a quick key for that one is Shift greater than. So I'm hitting Shift greater than, and what it does is it grows my selection. You can go to Select and see Grow Selection somewhere in this list right here at Grow. And that will grow my selection. And I think I'm going to do one more. That should be good. Okay. So I grabbed all these faces that are pretty much facing straight up and down. And then I'm going to go to UV, and I'm going to say planar mapping, because I want basically just a flat plane just to project here. Inside the option box for this one, I'm going to tell it which direction, the Y direction. Make sure it goes to a bounding box, and then I'm going to say keep image height width. If I reset this, the only thing we have to change is these two. Okay. So now I project, and then we'll see perfect squares. Okay. Now we do have some stretching here, but I'm not going to actually put a texture there, so I don't really care. I'm going to put a texture here where this dip is, so I'm not too concerned about the other areas. Now the other thing we have to look at is see the size of these squares. The size of these squares here is pretty big. The size of these ones are pretty small. So if I were to bring a texture in, one texture would be really nice resolution, the other one would be kind of stretched out. Okay? So to keep consistency, I'm going to grab this square and just scale it out until it's about the same size as the other one. I'm going to keep going. Later. So now that we have this set up, I'm going to go back to my UV texture editor, and you'll see that now we have this big circle in the list. Okay? That big circle is that top flattened out. Now we have the bottom. Again, we don't see the bottom, but I like to make sure everything's laid out. So I'm going to grab the bottom, anything that's facing that same direction. So I hit Shift greater than a couple times. Should be good. Go back to UV, go back to planar mapping. These options should be the same because it's still the Y direction. I hit project, and then I'm just going to scale this up until the squares are all the same size. Now I'm grabbing a corner because if I grab a green or a red in the center, it'll stretch it out in those directions. We don't want to do that. So I'm just going to grab the corner. That looks pretty good. Again, it's an eyeball thing, so it doesn't have to be exact. All right, so now what I'm going to do inside of here, see this top square here? I'm going to right click and go to shell, and I'm just going to move these around, okay? So what I want to do is fill this box, this top right box. I want to fill that with these items just so that they fit nicely inside there. I don't want them to go beyond it because that's a bad thing. I don't want them to be super tiny because that's also a bad thing. If I go to scale and I click and drag on this middle one, that's a bad thing to have it super tiny. If I go above it, that's a bad thing to go above it. Our goal is to fit it right within this. So I'm going to shrink it down a touch and move it over. Okay. Now if we look at this, we're going to see that this label area is pretty big. Our label only needs to be essentially like right here. There's nothing going to be on the back of this. Like if you had like shaving cream, they may have stuff on the front and stuff on the back and stuff wherever else, but usually they don't have like crazy amounts of stuff on fancy things. Like this, you can see there's stuff all over this label. On my beverage up here, there's stuff all over the label. We don't need to use all over the label stuff. So I'm going to cut this in half. So I'm going to right click and go to edge, and I'm going to find maybe about there. I'm just going to double click it right here. And what that should do is when I double click, it should go all the way to the end. And it does. It goes all the way to the end here and all the way to the end there. Okay, and I'm just going to go to polygons, cut. And now if I right click and go to shell, now I have an extra piece. Okay, and so what this is going to allow me to do, it's not perfect, who cares, is allow me to just rearrange these. Should be good there. And then when I rearrange them, now I can go to my scale and scale it up and fit more in that top section. There we go. That's pretty good. Okay? So now that fits pretty good. So now we have more in there. Now that top square is going to be a texture. Okay? And textures are created in Photoshop. When we go to Photoshop and we start creating stuff, we're dealing with pixels. Okay? So imagine that you've opened a document in Photoshop and it's huge, like a gigabyte in size. You try to load that inside Maya and it's going to freak out, right? So then you say, okay, well, I'm going to make a small image. I'll make an image that's 1 kilobyte, and that's super tiny. But now that image doesn't have a whole lot of detail to it. So we're going to play this game of trying to find a good spot of where the detail is that we need. So this is good here. This is what you want to have for your layout. That's like perfect. So I'm going to go to object mode. I'm going to click on this. I'm going to just verify that everything looks good. I'm upside down. There we go. All right, everything looks fine. So now I'm going to go into the UV editor, go to polygons, and take a snapshot. Okay. So what this does is it takes a picture of that top right square. That's why everything has to fit inside it, because otherwise it wouldn't take a picture of everything in the square that we need. For our size here, we're going to go with 4096. Okay. That's 4,000 pixels by 4,096 pixels by 4,096. That's a good size to have for your texture. The format here, we can just set this to something you're more familiar with, which would be like a TIFF, and then we'll hit OK. Okay. So what this did is it just basically just took a snapshot. It says, what does that top right square look like? I'm going to save that out and I'm going to put it into an image. And now if I go to Photoshop and go to open, what I should be able to do is open that image and draw stuff right on top of it. So in my computer here, there. And inside my images folder, there's my out UV. Okay. So inside here, there's the image. Now it's hard to see, so what I'm going to do is hit Control L. And I'm just going to pull my contrast up. Okay? So I just pulled that right handlebar all the way up to the left until I see it, and then I can hit OK. I hit cancel, didn't I?
Oh, you're locked, I think.
I shouldn't be locked.
You have some background layer.
That shouldn't matter. I should be able to adjust the levels. Use Photoshop to tell me what I can't do. Just going to keep fighting this thing. I'll just put an adjustment layer on it. That should work. There we go. Good. And then I'll show you Photoshop. I'm just going to merge you together. Whatever. We'll leave it exactly the way it is, and we just won't touch it. Okay. Now, the only thing we need this for is that we're going to create a picture. We're going to create a label, and when we bring this label back into Maya, we need to make sure that certain parts go on the top, certain parts go on the front. That's it. Okay. So once we're here, I'm going to just show you just a quick overview of this. So I'm just going to create some shapes. So let's say I make a new layer. And pull this up here so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to color it something gaudy just so you can see what's happening. There we go. And here's the top of this. So I'm going to make a circle. That's where my sticker label will go. I'll again make it an ugly color. Perfect. I'm going to hide these and just make a white background underneath. There we go. Okay. And just to kind of prove what's going on here, I'll just put a letter in the middle of this. Yes. There we go. No, it's underneath, so we got to pull it up top. Do that. There we go. All right, so there's the S. I should have picked a different letter because otherwise I don't know if it's upside down. TJ, there we go. I'm compromising. See, it's a win-win situation for everyone. All right, so TJ is going to go here, and then we'll also drop TJ down there. All right, so I'm going to save this, and this is going to be called lotion label. It goes inside my source images folder. I don't need layers. I don't need alpha channel. Save it as a TIFF is fine. Okay, so now I'm done with the checkerboard. The checkerboard is simply there so that I know what a good texture looks like. I'm done with it. So I'm just going to assign a brand new Mila to this. And I'll call this lotion Mila. I'm going to click on the color box here. I'm going to go to File, go to the folder, go to my lotion label, and there it is. It says TJ and TJ. Okay? Now, obviously, there's an issue, right? Because, number one, the label covers over the cap, which is kind of funny. Obviously, if we had one of those little stickers, sometimes they have those stickers so you don't break it, I guess, or steal it. That would maybe be appropriate, but I want to get rid of that. Also, my TJ and TJ are totally different directions. I don't want it to look like that. I want this to be facing essentially the same direction. So if I go to my UV editor, this is where that top piece is. So if I go to my shell and I click on it, I can just go to rotate and just rotate this around. There we go. Okay, so now it fits perfectly. And then I can just take this whole thing and just rotate this whole thing all the way around. So now it says TJ, TJ. And then I can jump back to Photoshop. I can realize, oops, I shouldn't have crossed the line right here. See that line? So I'm going to just go to my marquee tool and draw a box like that. Delete that. Shrink my TJ copy down. There we go. Turn that off. Save it. Lotion label. No alpha, no layers. Save. Yes. Okie dokie. Then go back to here. I need to get back to that file so I can say reload. Quick way to do that is focus. Here's the last couple things you were at. There's the file I was just at. Reload. And so it adjusts it. Okay? So at this point, it's now just about me going back into Photoshop and designing a cool label that I could bring back into this. Okay? So once I have this, it's just a matter of playing. Yes, sir?
How does it know not to put the white on there?
It is putting the white on there.
It is? Okay.
Yep. The white is right on top of it. It just looks kind of grayish in the scene. If I were to go here and pick, again, a horrible color. Oops. I just deleted my layer. There we go. And then we save this as...
So bright.
It is bright. And you would think people actually wouldn't pick these colors, but so many assignments get turned in like this.
All the time.
And I tell them, I was like, you're burning my eyes out. There we go. It doesn't look horrible in here. You know, it's a little bit darker. But yes, it is showing that color. So every single thing we would want on a label, we would put on that Photoshop label and then reload it back into here. Okay? So if we look at an actual label again for like hand lotion label, hello, you'll see the different kinds of things that might be on a hand lotion label. And again, your ability to create something that is believable as a label will make your product in 3D look all the more believable, okay? So if you are not very good at Photoshop, obviously you may want to take a few minutes to play with Photoshop before you start attempting this so that we don't end up with, I don't know how to use text, so I'm just gonna go and just go T.
Oh.
That's supposed to be a T. I can't erase. I don't know how to erase in Photoshop. Oh no. All right, it's just that's the label now. Okay. So you want nice labels. Okay. Take the time to examine labels. Take the time to go to here and look at these. I don't care if you mimic something that's already out there. I don't want you scanning in something and using that. I want you to recreate it. So if you look at this and you say, I like the circles, I like the square, I like the ribbon going around it, do that. That's fine.
You're giving me ideas.
Yes. Hopefully the good ones, not the bad ones. And then here's the one for the top, right? So this one's very simple. It says hand cream, all natural handmade, olive oil and lavender, whatever. Now you can do all this stuff in Illustrator too. Okay, you can do it in Illustrator and then copy and paste it in Photoshop and just make sure that it lands right inside this area and right inside that area. If it lands outside of that, then it's going to be placed wrong. Okay. So with a lot of opportunity with this because there's a lot of different things that we can do. And you want to talk about like the serious 3D stuff, this is a lot of what's going on right now. Is instead of me going out there and getting a bunch of products and then setting up a photo shoot and then taking pictures of all this stuff, how easy was that? I mean, my lecture time, and I blab a lot obviously, is only 40 minutes, and I've already essentially created this kind of stuff, right? So it's not a terribly long process to do any of these kinds of things. So look at what you have inside of your stuff and then try to find something that makes sense with those specific things. Okay? So you're going to be creating 3 objects. This should be object number 1. This should be object number 2. In the video where I don't go step by step as far as like showing you each or telling you what I'm doing, but just kind of like you watch me model, I go over one that has like a little pump on it. So if you wanted to have something that had like a pump on it and show that, you could do that. Or you can find something else that would fit this circuit and have that in there as well. Okay? All right, so easy things, modeling. You saw how quickly I modeled it. The hardest part to wrap your brain around is this texturing business. How do we wrap it to get it to work correctly and working back and forth between Photoshop? The more you do it, the easier it's going to get. And this kind of stuff never stops. In the modeling class, they do it again. In the animation class, they do it again. In the rendering class, they do it again. And when you get into the higher end stuff, they're using programs like Mari. And in Mari, you're just like cutting the middleman out, and you're literally painting. I don't know why I think it's going to pull up what I'm thinking. You're painting right on the geometry. So if you wanted this guy to look like that, you modeled him, you bring him into Mari, and you're painting textures right onto him. So you have a picture of scales, you drop it on, and you're painting scales right on this dinosaur. You have this guy, you're painting beads of sweat on him. You have this thing, you're painting whatever war paint on him. Okay? So all of these different things are different ways that this process here, once we understand it, evolves into. Okay? But we have to understand the foundation stuff, and then we can get into more of that stuff. Okay?
Where can I download that at?
Mari, the Foundry. You can actually download, there's another one.